Good day, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today at Daily Maverick's webinar with Cynthia Stimpel. I am Pauli van Wyk. I'm an investigative journalist at Scorpio at Daily Maverick, and I'll be your host today. Well, today we discuss one of our national heroes, Cynthia. Thank you very much for being here and welcome with us.
Thank you so much.
Cynthia is someone who had a strong effect on every South African life, whether we know that or not. And when she pulled back the curtain over wrongdoing at SAA, we got to know her by name. Cynthia was one of those cogs in the government system that made it change, and change for the better. So in turn, we and government had also an influence on Cynthia's life, obviously, and one that is perhaps not always so positive, and we'll inquire about that later, Cynthia. We are honored to have you with us today, and we will open up for questions from our audience as well. If you guys look at your right, I see a lot of people has already started greeting you, Cynthia, and me, and we have some people locked in, so you all can send us your questions and the things that you would like Cynthia to answer. But before we get there, I have something to say. I sense a shitload of distress and nervousness and even panic about the current spell of violence. So I must say that journalists are working very hard to figure out exactly what the status of the unrest is and who is instigating it. What we know so far is that the network towers, water networks, electricity supplies, hospitals, and those journalists' offices are being attacked. It's not quintessential behavior of a protester, and the pillaging of the malls is also on a scale that is not normal and that we haven't come to know. It also seems strange, the police's behavior in terms of KZN and police, and especially looking at the people being arrested. And all this indicate coordinated attacks against the state, and that factions in the police that may aid some of the situations. So the secret state is at war with the legitimate state at the moment. We know that former President Zuma's side, as well as certain opposition politicians, fear a strong state and a second Ramaphosa term because it will mean jail time. We must remember that President Zuma has lived his life creating chaos, especially at those moments when the tide is turning against him. It leaves him room to maneuver, and it leaves him a maneuverable situation where he can get his way with us once again. So his conduct is all about going to jail, but it's also about other people going to jail. It is about a state correcting itself, and it's about a fight back against doing the right thing. We need to keep calm and quiet. I know it's distressing. I know it's difficult. This is a kick of a dying horse. It would always have looked this way. It would never have looked different. It would never have looked different if a functioning state was correcting itself after more than a decade of severe corruption and disaster almost. So just hold on, keep safe. Don't in any way participate or retaliate. Be careful to run ahead of ourselves. There's no indication or signs of a proper coup. It's about disorganization, it's about bullying the state, and it's about people not wanting to go to jail. Okay, so it's about the gross testing of our judicial system and our laws and our resolve to hold on to that as our North Star, to be a democratic state. It will fizzle out. And I do think that what's happening inside our communities right now is possibly the best thing that can happen to South Africa in terms of long-term social relationships. I will be part of building these relationships and focus on where, along with my neighbors, I can make a positive difference in the coming days. Okay, so that be it. Now on to better things. Cynthia, one of your very interesting claims to fame is that you are one of the very few people in the world that got the cantankerous Minister Pravin Gordhan to apologize. And if you know Pravin, you will know that this doesn't happen, ever. Even when Pravin needs to apologize, he doesn't. So I want you to tell about that time when you and I and Pravin shared a stage at a Daily Maverick event in a time where we could still hold and host events, where you came out and you, for the first time, told your story. I want you to tell us quickly, what was that story about, and how was it that you got entangled into the SAA Airbus Durumiyeni corruption debacle?
Thank you, Pauli, for having me here. Thank you, Daily Maverick. Thank you for the opportunity. And thank you to all the listeners and everyone tuning in today. I am so honored and so humbled. Thanks. So let's go to the Daily Maverick event. That was my first time doing a public speaking event. I actually had signed on to come and attend the Insider event, more because there was discussions going to be around the Zondo Commission. And I knew that I had already been talking to the investigators of the Zondo Commission and thought, let me go and find out more about it. And coming there, entering, I had no idea that I would be speaking that evening. I was called aside by Fran and Ferial and asked if I could just speak 5 minutes around my story. And I said it was time. And I did. I gave a quick overview of what the story was about. And the most wonderful thing happened is that, firstly, I got a standing ovation from everyone in the auditorium, and that astounded me. I was so emotional at the time because, it hasn't happened before. And following that is that Minister Gordhan was sitting next to me, and we were all standing at the time, and then he publicly apologized, saying that we need more people like me to speak out and stand up. So yes, so that was nutshell, I think the catalyst moment for me to start speaking out publicly. Yes.
Why then? Why did you decide, okay, I'm ready. I can tell this for the first time? Because remember, and the people must remember, that you didn't want to speak to us as journalists. You didn't want to tell your story. We tried many times. We pestered you, and you can account to that. So what happened? What was the trigger for you to start telling the world, okay, I have something to say?
It's where you're at, I think, Pauli. So at the time when the journalists were all calling me, I was just suspended from SA. And then I went through the whole process with all my cases, be it the CCMA, be it the disciplinary hearing and the Labour Court. I had journalists all phoning me, texting me, but it was just not, I felt it wasn't an ethical process to do just yet. Reason being, when you sign on with an organization, you sign on to say that you're not going to be the public face of that organization. You won't be speaking about it. They do have their own communications department and event, and they actually said, we'd love you to speak, please do. And that was great. Thank you very much. To go on to the Airbus deal, you had a question around that. So I'm going to put it in a quick way, if you don't mind, that what transpired is that SA had already ordered aircraft in 2002, 2003. It was a huge amount. What happens if you purchase a car, you're going to put down a deposit. Same thing. For SAA, it's called pre-delivery payments, PDPs is what we called it, and money is paid on a regular basis, and it's kept at Airbus, where we purchased these aircraft. Come the time of delivery of these aircraft, SAA was in a crux financially and realized that they couldn't pay the additional fees to get the aircraft. There was discussion between Airbus and the then board members and fleet members, and it was agreed that they will reduce the aircraft to 10 at the time. And At that time, the deal was agreed, and when it had to come to delivery, SAA was even in a worse state, and the aircraft was then reduced to 5. And it was the 5 that was eventually delivered to SAA. But during the time of the discussions of the 10 aircraft, this was discussed at board level. A Section 54, according to the PFMA regulations, which is the Public Finance Management Act, for those who don't know it or haven't been privy to it, there's a Section 54 that says any state-owned organization, whether they're borrowing funds or going into any debt, they need to first get permission from the minister, who at the time for SAA was the National Treasury. It was first Department of Public Enterprises, and we later changed to National Treasury. But during that time, the Section 54 was written, the application was done, it had gone to the to National Treasury, it was approved, and so there was the 10 aircraft. It was also minuted in the board. However, the chairperson, the then chairperson, Ms. Dudu Mayeni, chose to change it to 2. And she wanted the company secretary to change it, which he refused. And then on top of it, she calls a board meeting and then tells the board meeting, oh, we must have misheard or something like that, but it was actually 2, not the 10 aircraft. And she tried to overturn it. But the then board,
wasn't it? It was a bullying of someone, of Dudu, trying to get the board to change the minutes, which is going towards a fraudulent situation, isn't it?
Exactly, and that is not that's in dereliction of duties, as in not following the proper governance process and going against what is decided as a group when you have to take a majority consent on it, which was done already. When the then board decided to stand up against and call a meeting to discuss this, she never appeared. Subsequent to that is that some board members resigned, and she then had control over the current board, which was only left with 3 non-executive board members, Ms. Mayeni, Yake Kwenane, and Dr. Tambi. With those and the 2 new executive directors, they could then do the approval, and then they agreed on changing the Airbus deal and wanting to bring in a leasing company so that no longer it's going to come from Airbus, it was going to be coming from a middleman. And on top of that, they stated there'll be no currency risk for SAA. Now, you know, whether you're buying, I'll relate it to a simple way. We all fill our cars with petrol, but yet the price of Brent crude is in dollars. So every time that price changes, it affects our price we fill in every day when you fill your car. It's a similar thing. When you're buying an asset in a currency, like, for instance, dollars, aircraft is priced in dollars, and to say there'll be no currency exposure or risk for SAA was obviously wrong, and this is what they proposed. It was thrown out by Minister Nene at the time, and obviously that we all know the result of that. He subsequently got fired from the position. My personal involvement was that it should have come through Treasury, but it didn't, and I only got to know about it through National Treasury asking me, had I seen this? Am I aware that there's currency risk? Did I recommend this? And I said, no, I didn't, because just reading the document, I can see that there's currency risk. And and I said I wouldn't have passed it. And on top of that, I also passed it on to our pilot, one of the pilots I was in touch with, to say, oh, are you guys aware? Because there should be pilots also onto the fleet committee and aware that it's going to affect their long-term planning and their scheduling. And that's it in a nutshell. Thank you. Any further questions, I will definitely answer for clarification.
Yeah, I see that several of your former colleagues have also logged in. Welcome to everyone who logged in the meantime. We are here to discuss Cynthia Stimpel and her new book, Hijackers on Board. It's now on the bookshops, and you can get it on Daily Maverick's platform, delivered to your house as well. We also had a few opening remarks relating to the current violence in the country, and you can always go listen to the recording later on Daily Maverick's website. So, Cynthia, I want you to take us just back to that moment that made Pravin Gordhan apologize to you. So then you saw things were going very wrong very quickly. There was a certain amount of money that you wanted to save, and you reported it to Treasury, and there was silence. And then later they had to act. So just 2 sentences about how that came about, and then we can move on to our next theme.
Okay, so the involvement was mainly on the BNP Capital. We were procuring funds for SAA, or rather sourcing funds is the word I would rather use from a financial perspective. And historically, SAA always sourced funds from banks, more because banks are credit rated. It's part of our financial risk management policy. And they are able to, if they are unable to source the amount requested, they can get it from other banks and become a lead arranger. And that was the methodology we used. When SA wanted to consolidate the funds so that we could save on interest paid, that we were paying at almost about 1.2 billion a year only in interest paid, and the intention was to save costs for SA. And hence we thought if we consolidate, take a longer term over, repay the debt, SAA then has some saving costs. And in a rough calculation we made, if we took a ballpark figure and a rate over the period of 5 years, SA would have saved roughly about 300 to 400 million. And that is what we motivated to our board as well as to National Treasury. We've even put it into a borrowing plan. However, what transpired is that this deal went around from a procurement perspective. A transaction advisor was chosen. The transaction advisor's scope was changed to source funding for SA at a rate which was even higher, costing, the initial fee was going to be about 300 million. The second finally approved fee would have cost SA 225 million, and because it's a service, you add that, it amounts to 256 million, and that's what SA would have paid. So it was on that basis I spoke up and reported it to National Treasury, reported it to various executives to try and stop this transaction. Thanks.
The story is much about, as you picture it, a out-of-control debt book of SAA. And I think your story also details a lot of what happened at SAA and why it's a failed state-owned enterprise. It does give us some inside information, and you describe it quite well in your book. Judge Zondo ensured that she would testify, kicking and screaming almost. Now, I and our listeners, including Julian Thompson, has a question, why did she get away with this? Were the board just pussyfooting around her? Were they too nice about it? Is our democratic system a system that isn't well suited to deal with delinquent Democrats or delinquent people who doesn't understand democratic processes? Can you give us insight into her way of doing things and why we had to come to this?
Okay, the question you mentioned, Julian asked, why did she get away with it, is a question I also have for myself. It's gone over my mind many times, because when I started thinking around the board members who picked up that she wanted to change the Airbus deal, that time, which I only found out much later, I didn't even know about those events until I left SAA. So when she did that, it would have been the board's duties to stand up and they take the action and get her to delinquent director. But they didn't. Instead, it was easier for them to walk away and resign. If they did that, I probably, and many of us that have stood up in the organization would probably still be, have held our jobs at SAA, and perhaps SAA would still be running, who knows. But so that was the one part where they could have stopped. They had the power far more than us that are at a lower level. How does she get away with it? I think my personal view is that she's quite manipulative, and she's also she's vindictive, and I can safely say that because there was one stage where a pilot, in fact, the Air Pilots Association had written a letter to her when she became the chairperson saying that they have no confidence in her. And they then requested that some inquiry be done, but they definitely had no confidence in her. She then went to charge the head of the pilot, John Harty, for sabotage. He had to spend so many months trying to defend himself and prove himself not guilty, not involved with sabotage, that there was absolutely nothing to that. So that's the vindictiveness that happens around her, and very manipulative. And so that's how she gets away with things. Thanks.
It does sound as if we were all just too nice about it, and as if we didn't put our foot down earlier, but we also didn't read the signs properly. And it might be an indication of you get what you vote for in the broader picture. Yep. Pashwani Tadi also wants to know, how do you feel when Dudu refused to answer questions of the commission? Did you, and from my side, I would say, did you recognize the behavior?
Oh, yes. I was actually at the Zondo Commission. So when she gave evidence, as did Ms. Kwinana, I went to the Zondo physically and I watched. I was sitting there in the audience and literally pulling my hair out. And every time I wanted to put my hand up and hope I can catch Zondo's eye, but I had to pull my hand and keep it, literally sit on it so I could, because it's not allowed. But yes, she's got a way about her in that I recall the one meeting we had where she called us and said, it's our time to eat. I note that in the book. But she also made another statement saying they are dressing me in public. I don't know if you can recall, if it was a Shapiro drawing where she was on this big wrecking ball and he had Dudu on it. And she was referring to that, saying that they are undressing me in public. But she said, this BB sleeps well at night. And then she explains, BB means Black Beauty, So for us, it's like, what? So, I haven't got words because I just felt, she always says, I will come to the Zondo, I will do this. She didn't come to Zondo how many times? With a delinquent case, she didn't even have transport to get there, according to her. And when the first part of the delinquent case was going on, she wasn't even present. Her lawyers were there. But because of time, the lawyers had agreed to go ahead. So there is some sort of attitude in her that she feels that she can bypass, that she doesn't have to adhere to the law or follow it. That's Miss Mayeni. Yes.
It would be extremely funny if you weren't so serious and if she didn't hold the purse in many ways, or wanted to get her hands on the purse, rather. I want to move on from Dudu Myeni onto better things. And I want to read just one sentence in your book that I have written down for myself and which I will never forget. If you live with your purpose and intention, you are comfortable with who you are. It is something that it was so close to the start of your book that you wrote this. And I thought it was quite encompassing of your character and of the way you do things. And I want to lead in with that in asking you, what are the characteristics of a person that becomes a whistleblower? Because in my experience, and when I see and speak to sources, they don't think of themselves as whistleblowers. They come to a point where they say, but this isn't okay. I cannot stomach this anymore. This is against the laws of the country. People are trying to be manipulated in true South African style sometimes into a race situation, but it is not. It's not a good thing for South Africa and for my people. And when I say my people, I mean in the broad spectrum of all South Africans. And I want to ask you if that is your idea of the world as well, and to help us with the characteristics and the makeup of a person that decides to their own detriment, to tell us what's happening inside a state-owned organization.
Thank you for that question, Pauli. Yeah, it's not an easy journey. No one wakes up and decides, I'm going to whistleblow. You don't even think of the word whistleblower at the time. And so you can't see it defining you at the time. What does happen is, and from the stories I've read and the people I've spoken to that were whistleblowers, is that they see something fundamentally like, do I have the courage? You question yourself, how do I do it? And when do I do it? So you go through these sort of questions. And if I may, in my case, is my first trigger was when I got a board resolution whereby FTC was brought in that didn't pass the RFP process, our request for proposal process. It was just decided at a board meeting. Then I realized I need to do something here now. All the time I was pushing back by writing to board, by asking questions, all that, nothing worked. But when this board resolution came, literally telling me I have to act when I know it's wrong. How do you do that? I literally took it to the risk committee meetings, to the financial risk committee people, to my colleague, Michael Klein, and he had a different view. I had a different view, and it just didn't sit right. So that was December 2015. By the time I eventually spoke out was May. So can you see the timing? So all the time I'm still reporting it to various people, raising the concerns. I've raised it even with our risk head, and then something else happens, and then something else. So it's a continuous process. The question you're asking then is what makes up that profile? I think it's when you're sure of your own personal values, your personal beliefs, your principles, and you stick with those, that helps you define, I need to stand up and I need to speak out. The duration obviously takes longer for some of us, and some of us are really devastated once you've taken that step, because we are naive when we do take the step. And I must say I was. You think that once you do it, you've notified authorities, you've notified seniors, you've notified colleagues, your peer level, that everyone would start working and the cogs would start working together and it would lock into place. It doesn't happen. And you find you're all on your own. And then the devastation hits in. Then it's like someone just slapped you, knocked you over, pulled the carpet from you, and you have to get up, literally crawl up, and then say, what happened here and how do I go forward? Shall I leave it there? You want me to explain some more?
No, you're very eloquent about it. I want to ask you, and we'll come back later in our next theme on the triggering things that happened after your suspension and what became of you. But Johan van Logrenberg, someone who worked at SARS and someone who has been writing books and being written about a lot as well, is asking, obviously for reasons that he also feel, what is the effects on your family and on the people around you of your whistleblowing?
Yeah. So it does have a devastation to them as well. They also feel the pain. From my perspective is that I had consulted with my family prior. When I recall the day I had got that board resolution, which was, I had it in my handbag. I was walking around with it. It was even that crumpled because I kept opening it, looking at it, folding it, putting it back in my bag. And the evening when Nene got fired from National Treasury, I hauled it out of my handbag and I said to my family, this is what's happening at SAA, and I'm sure part of this is affecting one of the reasons Nene got fired. So the family knew already, and I was saying, even then they knew that whatever I was involved with was precarious because it was a huge decision process that I'm involved in with the funding of SAA, and we see the repercussions happening to Nene. And as the the FTC deal came in, then the BNP deal came in, and then the changing of the scope, all that I've been consulting with family. And then I told them by May, I said, I'm going to now whistleblow. I'm going to do this formally. I'm going to, because I've told many people in top areas, but no one's still doing anything. And my family initially said, you will be fired, you will lose your job. And I said, yes, but I can't. My words were to them as, I'm not worth my salt if I don't speak up. I'm not worth saying that I'm a group treasurer if I don't speak up. And so I might as well just walk away and pretend nothing happened. And I can't do that either, because then I won't live with myself. So those are my words directly to my family. And they said to me, Cynthia, my husband, my in-laws, and my children, Mom, we will support you whichever way. Whatever you need to do, we will support you. So that was the impetus for me that could take me forward. The result, yes, it did impact them. It impacts them from having to I would say carry you. They carry you in many ways. They're carrying you emotionally. They're carrying you, constant checking up on you. Are you okay? Are you surviving this? They're carrying you financially. They're carrying you with love that they could, and concern. So you need that. If you're on your own, you're not going to make it. If the family's not with you to have your back, you're not going to make it. And I think that was my blessing, because I can't say I didn't go into depression, but I think my daughter may have noticed. That's why she said, Mom, I think you need to go and see a psychologist. Just chat to him, just because she's a medical doctor. But in my mind, it was good that I did do it. And so it was various degrees of how we experience it. And depending on how close we are with our family or what our debt situation is,
Cynthia, I think you are.
And our friend situation is where our support system is. It can have devastating.
Cynthia?
Pardon?
I think
I'm also
Wi-Fi...
quite strong in, because I do yoga, use that a local space. Thanks.
Sorry, I think your Wi-Fi isn't great. Yeah, Cynthia's Wi-Fi isn't great. She will probably just log into the room again. In the meantime, we'll discuss the next theme. And when she logs back in, we'll ask her all the questions. Now, there was a question by Winston Middleton, who asked, what's the makeup further of a whistleblower?
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
I didn't hear you. Sorry.
No, that's fine. I think the wonky Wi-Fi is trying to curtail us. It's fine. I'm trying to ask a new question, and I'm wondering, leading on from our audience, tell us about those early age young girl experiences of yours where you learned very important lessons in life. And doing that, you'll answer a lot of the questions that we're getting from people saying, what is the social support structure that you had, and how did you develop into becoming a person that argues in the way that you do? So maybe tell us that little tale of your mom and the dolls that you had to return, or the way that your father was upset about the pencil. Oh my word, yeah. Let's see how her Wi-Fi holds up. But so there's an instance where her mother instructed the girls. Cynthia was one of 10 siblings, and her mother instructed to take the dolls back to the house of a friend who gave it and loaned it to her, and with the instruction and saying, you do not take things that aren't yours. And the same with a pen. Will you want to pick up here? The same with a pen or the pencil that your sister picked up.
Yes, thank you for that. So early in our life, our parents were very strict about our upbringing and our values and certain rules, like don't take what's not yours. And I recall an incident where my elder sister and I were playing with some friends, and we stayed there the whole afternoon and played with lovely dolls that our friends had. And when her mother saw, she said, no, we could borrow them and bring them the next day. And we gladly came home. And when my mother saw that, she said, no way. She literally marched us to our friend's house and said, sorry.
Cynthia, I'm going to ask you your
daughters should not be taking anything that does not belong to them, and we returned the dog. The hairdresser, and while we were waiting,
Sorry, maybe if you put your video off, your Wi-Fi doesn't work so hard. Let's try that. Yeah, try again about hairdresser.
Yes, so the incident at the hairdresser was that my elder sister, Linda, saw this pen on the floor, obviously fallen out either from a client or the owner, and she picked it up, playing with it, and came home with it. And when my dad saw that, he was literally livid, and he said, no, we're going to take it back. And he took it back, and he said, apologize that she picked it up and that he didn't notice, and gave it back. So it was that early lessons we learned already, that you just don't take something that does not belong to you. And just various things, there were always life lessons in the way they taught us, fixing things, learning skills to maintain, fixing, like my mom always had the stitch in time saves 9. So we always had to, if you see something, fix it now, don't wait later. So those were the little lessons we learned. Thanks.
I find that it's those early life lessons that does make a difference in a whistleblower's life. And we can see it in especially whistleblowers where their intention is always for the greater good. You obviously get different whistleblowers that often blows the whistle, shines the spotlight based on retribution. Now, I want to ask you a hard question. Why didn't you do something earlier? In your book, I was struck by how long it took for you to say, okay, but this is not okay now, or this is now enough. The situation almost came to you, but many of your colleagues before that, lost her again. So the situation at the time was that Cynthia lost some colleagues, and she's describing this continuous revolving door of people in SAA that just left. They were appointed and then they just left, and that there was no continuity. Now that's important, and it's an important clue. The rest of the country at the time already knew that something is not right at SAA and something is problematic. But Cynthia stayed, and I wanted to ask her what are the reasons for staying, and why is it that she decided to stay? Cynthia's Wi-Fi is really problematic, so I think I'm going to end it here. And it's worrying, and it's sorry, because I really wanted her to talk about whistleblower legislation, and I see that Rory Stain and other people also had the same questions, but maybe the weather isn't playing along with the Wi-Fi system. So I want to thank you all for being here, for taking the time, and I want you to be safe and calm and good outside, and think of how we can build our country all together, and be brave in a way that Cynthia has taught us and showed us how. Thank you all for joining, and I must say again, thank you to all the insiders, the Maverick insiders. You guys are the reason why we can keep on doing this, and why we can keep on investigating what's happening in our country, and why Scorpio is such a leading light at Daily Maverick. We appreciate you. Good day to you all. Bye.